By mid-March 2026, the geopolitical order that have governed the Middle East since 1979 was violently shattered. The collapse followed the February 28 execution of Operations Epic Fury and Roaring Lion, a lightning joint military campaign by the United States and Israel. This strategy targeted the institutional heart of Tehran. Precision strikes eliminated the supreme leader, the Minister of Defense, and the top-tier commanders of the IRGC to functionally decapitate the state. While planners intended for these strikes to neutralize Iran's offensive capabilities, the reality was a rapid, exponential increase in regional violence. Functional decapitation atomizes command structures. It turns a single, predictable hierarchy into a systemic contagion of thousands of uncoordinated threats. This contagion forced a total regional realignment through three specific, compounding vectors. The first vector was tactical retaliation. State-to-state missile warfare broke out across the Persian Gulf as military remnants operated without centralized restraint. The second vector was logistical breakdown. The strikes paralyzed the internal economy, accelerating hyperinflation and stripping the currency of all value. The third vector was geopolitical fragmentation. Historic allies abandoned unified coalitions to engage in strategic hedging. Together, these vectors show that kinetic military action is inseparable from macroeconomic and geopolitical realities. To trace the military fallout, we begin with the immediate retaliation from the fractured Iranian state. Before the strikes, Iran used a hub-and-spoke command structure to dictate precise orders to regional proxy nodes. The death of top IRGC commanders dissolved this central authority, leaving network nodes disconnected but fully armed. Without top-down restraint, these autonomous units began operating independently. This manifested as Operation True Promise 4. Fractured Iranian units launched massive, uncoordinated missile strikes against Saudi oil stabilization plants and the U.S. Fifth Fleet. Simultaneously, drone swarms struck civilian infrastructure in neighboring Gulf states, spiking maritime insurance premiums and disrupting global trade. Following the decapitation, the remnants of the Iranian military leveraged their primary strategic deterrent, control over the Strait of Hormuz. ISW data reveals that Iranian forces utilized small projectile harassment against commercial vessels within this narrow bottleneck. This low-cost harassment campaign forced civilian shipping to comply with an illegal traffic separation scheme, holding the global energy market hostage. Removing a central command forces a desperate military apparatus to weaponize economic choke points for survival. Domestic instability inside Iran further complicated the military picture. The strikes intersected with the Winter Uprising, a period of extreme internal fragility that primed the state for a total logistical failure. This chart tracks the rial's vertical drop following the strikes, plummeting to 1.75 million per USD. This hyperinflation paralyzed domestic supply chains, making the currency virtually worthless. To control panic, the state severed telecommunications, plunging internet connectivity to near zero. Urban centers emptied as millions of civilians fled, creating a staggering humanitarian crisis. ACAP's data records 3.2 million displaced persons, moving away from targeted areas. This sudden movement threatened to spill across borders, as 4.4 million vulnerable Afghan nationals living in Iran were forced to relocate. The regular army, the Artesh, adopted strategic neutrality. Soldiers refused to fire on protesters, leaving the regime without a reliable internal security force. Precision military strikes on a fragile economy trigger an inevitable transnational humanitarian disaster. On the global stage, neighboring powers adjusted their foreign policies to insulate themselves from the chaos. We can use the foreign policy analysis framework to see why traditional alliances failed to hold after the strikes. While the U.S. and Israel pursued their security objectives, regional actors perceived the strikes as unprovoked, norm-violating aggression. Iran responded by heavily engaging with multilateral institutions, positioning itself as a rule-abiding state under attack. By coordinating with the IAEA and appealing to UN mechanisms, Iran successfully leveraged international law to build diplomatic legitimacy. This shift fractured the Gulf Cooperation Council. Members began questioning the long-term cost of their defense partnerships with the United States. States like Oman, Qatar, and the UAE opted for strategic hedging and neutrality rather than joining a US-led coalition. These nations prioritized protecting their own energy infrastructure from the unguided missile threats launched by autonomous IRGC nodes. Russia and China capitalized on the perceived U.S. normative violation, positioning themselves as more reliable guarantors of regional stability. Violating international norms during a military intervention actively drives historical allies towards strategic neutrality. Based on current structural trajectories, the future of the Iranian state is likely to follow one of three paths. The first is the Garrison state, where mid-level IRGC commanders consolidate power into a secular military junta. The second is fragmented Balkanization, where the nation fractures along ethnic lines, creating a massive security vacuum similar to the crisis in Syria. The third, and least likely, is a managed democratic transition, which would require massive economic aid and the active protection of the Artesh. Regardless of the outcome, the region is now navigating volatile energy markets without traditional U.S. security guarantees. The events of March 2026 reveal the high cost of the decapitation strategy. Neutralizing the top leadership pushes a state's violent geopolitical footprint outward, shattering the systems that previously contained it. In an interconnected world, kinetic supremacy alone cannot maintain a regional security architecture. Tactical actions that lack international legitimacy will eventually fracture the alliances they were meant to protect. The post-1979 order was not replaced by stability, but by an uncoordinated and uncontrollable regional contagion.